Welcome to Fandom Power.
Hey guys, welcome back to Fandom Power Presents Order 66. I'm your host, Wes Arscott, and today with me in studio once again, Andrew Dawe.
Hello.
And Hank McClocklin.
Everyone.
This is it, guys. This is it. Episode 4. Our episode 4.
Mm-hmm. It's a heavy one. It's very emotional.
It is heavy. And I found myself a couple of times where I was, not going to lie, I bawled like a baby at a couple of points in this one. For personal reasons, but which may or may not come out over the course of this episode. So, before we get going into today's episode, last week we agreed that we'd do a little homework. And let's start with one of those pieces. So, question came up last week. Hey, where's the Darksaber during this period?
Yes, sir.
So, there is some explanation in the sense that we know, and you would know better than both Andy and I, Hank, because you actually read it, but it turns out that the Son of Dathomir comic series is actually the last canonical appearance of the Darksaber before Star Wars Rebels.
That's true. It's true.
So
it gets sort of ambiguously left there on Dathomir at the end. I mean, like it's not cut and dry.
No.
But I think what you dug for, I think you could find it to be a fact.
I think it dovetails nicely into some of the speculative stuff that we came up with, in the sense that, you know, hiding it, purposefully hiding it so as not to fall into the hands of your enemies, right? Because, like you say, like, all of Mandalore's at stake, and if you hold that seat of power, you'd be pretty hesitant to give it up. So on some level, he had to have some inkling that there was a real potential for things to go wrong. So at the very least, the throne of Mandalore, per se, would have been up in the air, and of course being...
Certainly he's very in tune with the dark side of the Force, and therefore what's happening, the zeitgeist of the Force in the galaxy at the time. And so having a power base to operate from instead of just some sort of willy-nilly solo position is much more favorable. It's someone as powerful and as crafty as he is. So it makes perfect sense.
Well, he's definitely shown making preparations for some event that he knows is coming. So
last episode he warned all the heads of, like he was...
Yeah.
He had some forethought for sure. He's operating from a place of knowledge.
Sent all the crime bosses into hiding.
Yeah,
that's right.
And then we've seen him in the duel with Darth Sidious dual wield the Darksaber with traditional lightsaber, but even that wasn't enough. So then he gets taken prisoner, and then there's that whole thing that we talked about with, facing off with Dooku. And then I think there was a mention of he uses it again in the comic books in a duel against General Grievous.
That's correct.
And then something to the effect of Mother Talzin possesses somebody, uses their body. But that is the last canonical appearance of the Darksaber, and like I say, he knows he's coming back to a Mandalore under siege. And I mean, his greatest, the greatest threat to him at that point is Bo-Katan and the Republic forces. So
no, absolutely.
I think on some level, he was protecting, his power base, so even if I'm captured, then, at some point I'll bust out and I'll get that back, because we know that the character has been pretty...
Right, and even if he can get, all good crime bosses, if he can get his words out,
being
in prison, they're going to do his bidding. It comes, the ruler of Mandalore comes with a de facto army and a de facto group of neutral systems that are attached to it, too.
That's right.
So, I mean, it's quite the thing to be, you're ostensibly 1/4 of the galaxy's power base.
Yeah. So that's it. I'm going to call it at that until, Lucasfilm decides that they want to, maybe address that one a little bit more on the nose. I'm going with it's hidden on Dathomir until it's discovered later on in Star Wars Rebels.
And they literally reference that phrase comes up. We found it among his belongings.
Yeah, his belongings. Yeah.
So, and there you have it.
Well, my friends, that brings us to the task at hand, and that is dun 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 the fourth and final episode of season 7.
12th episode.
Oh, sorry, the fourth and final episode of this arc.
True.
But you are correct. It is the 12th episode.
Victory and Death.
It's called Victory and Death. It has a runtime of 24 minutes. Like the rest of this season, written by Dave Filoni. This one directed by Daniel Villanova, who previously, I know we talked about him before, was a storyboard artist on Star Wars Rebels, and directed 3 other episodes this season. So once again, now that I was kind of pinged to what I discovered last week, hey, there's 2 official synopses for these episodes.
Oh, no.
Right. So this is the one here, the Wikipedia. Now these 2 actually are much more in line with each other than last week's were.
Yeah.
The Wikipedia one, presumably this is the official synopsis from when it came out last year, says, in the wake of Order 66, Ahsoka and Rex must work to survive. Whereas the Disney Plus episode little descriptor says, with the galaxy in chaos, Ahsoka and Rex are in a race to ensure their own survival. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty similar this time around. Once again, we get the Lucasfilm titles in green, and the Clone Wars title card comes up in red, just as it has for the entire arc. So as the title card sequence is playing, it's accompanied by a very particular piece of music, which is also called Victory and Death. Victory and Death, as well as the entire soundtrack, was composed by a guy by the name of Kevin Kinner. So if you've heard that name before, or if you haven't, he's composed the entire series, Clone Wars.
That's correct.
Also was a composer on Star Trek Enterprise.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, neither did I. Also did CSI Miami and Star Wars Rebels. So there's yeah, exactly. There's some consistency there across the branding. So no wonder. And very clearly he is schooled. He is wizened in the school of the Williams.
Yeah, I would have. Yeah, and I mean, much like Goranson, he's using that toolkit, if you will.
Yes.
And I don't know when in terms of classical score or film score, but in rap music and hip hop music, it's sampling, and it certainly feels like there's sampling or borrowing key elements from John Williams, and because it is totally seamless. And we certainly, especially last episode and this episode, we get those classic hero themes, but played so differently. Just like the whole somberness of the last episode with the sort of single notes on the piano. No, brilliant, man, brilliant.
And even this piece, like I've described it again with there's a vocal component, and I tried to get the lyrics for it, but I couldn't come up with anything concrete. There was a few speculative pieces that said, it could be like Gregorian style chant. Mm-hmm. It may have been Bulgarian. So I'm like, I didn't want to dive on it too hard in case it was wrong, but
certainly
the lyrical quality I described as this like haunting. And it's actually thematically it's really, really close. I had to go back and listen to it, but it's really, really close to the piece of music that's played at the moment of Padme's death.
Yeah.
So she could have been, that could be exactly where we are in terms of the crossover with Revenge of the Sith, like that time of her life, the end of her life.
That's right.
Because we don't hear that piece of music again once it ends.
Very good. Yeah. Because that's exactly, we're ostensibly a few hours after, Obi-Wan leaves Anakin on Mustafar.
The piece of music kind of, it mirrors what we're hearing. It mirrors Victory and Death, like I said, at the time of her death, and carries right through to Anakin being rebuilt as Darth Vader, right to the point where he gets up off of the helmet goes on, and you get that snapped
Rise.
And when he delivers the best line in cinematic history.
Well, there is that part too.
Yeah.
Lord Vader. Yes, Master. Rise.
The music continues while the scene fades to an exterior shot of the Victory-class Star Destroyer in hyperspace. The camera pulls in and transitions to an interior shot where we see a squad of clones cutting their way through the door to the medical bay where Ahsoka, Rex, and the droids were holed up in our last episode. Rex asks Ahsoka, how are they going to get out of here? And she says that she's got a plan, and she then instructs Rex to set his pistols on stun. As the torches continue to cut around the door jamb, Ahsoka beckons Rex to wait. And when the torches cut through the last remaining bit of structure, Ahsoka uses the Force to hurl the door down the hallway, taking out several clones along the way. Ahsoka with her lightsabers and Rex with his twin DC-17 pistols burst into the hallway and continue fighting off the remaining clones so that they can make their escape. But more 332nd clones arrive to fill in the ranks of the fallen. Ahsoka orders R7 to find a way out of here, and he jacks into the ship's computer.
R7, find us a path out of here.
After a short fight, Rex and Ahsoka manage to clear a path, and the droids, R7, GG, and Cheap, they make their way out into the hallway. R7 bleeps a short message to Ahsoka, and she relays to Rex that all the escape pods have been destroyed, and their best bet is to take a shuttle.
The escape pods have been destroyed. Taking a shuttle is our best bet.
In a moment of levity, which I found kind of funny that Rex still has time to pause and make a joke, Rex, taking in the bodies around him, stops to quip,
Boys are having a rough time of it.
Yeah.
and then he's like, did you hear that Maul escaped? Ahsoka retorts, he didn't escape, I let him out. Now Rex, fully back to his old self, says, what? Why? And as Ahsoka trots down the hallway, she calls back, diversion, come on! Rex, thinking out loud, says,
That's one word for it.
and then he gives chase to catch up. Kind of another moment of where we really get into the humanity of the clones, and that, you know,
It's
even
perfect to give Rex the human moments in this too. It's perfect.
in the darkest of times, and I say this from my own soldiering experience, that like when things are going really bad, black humor is some of the best. It just keeps you going, you know, like stuff that you would never even think about, you know, in the course of your day, you know, back here in Canada or wherever it is that you're listening to us from. But, you know, in the throes of war, it's amazing what you can find to keep going. Meanwhile, Maul makes his first appearance striding down a hallway. He's now wearing the clone armor vambrace with the comlink from the dismembered clone that we saw lose his arm back in episode 11. The comm goes off detailing that Target 1, Ahsoka, has escaped the medical bay. A second clone is heard asking about the status of CT-7567, Rex, and he's declared as missing in action. The voice says, did he aid in Tano's escape? And then the reply is unknown at present. As the comm chatter dies off, a pair of clones close in on Maul, and he promptly levitates them before force choking them to death. Funny, you know, Maul, like in the last episode, the last time we saw him, we talked a bit about how he was in and out of his insanity, as I've been calling it.
That's right.
In this episode, there's like almost none of that. He's all game, all episode, doesn't deviate.
dialogue.
Yeah, like really
Precision
none.
moves. He's
Yeah.
got a target, and he's going for it.
Next, we're treated to an establishing shot of a interior cavernous location on the ship. The area is crisscrossed with catwalks and large computer consoles reminiscent to the ones that we see on the Death Star back in 77. And in typical Star Wars fashion, the catwalks have no railings.
Railings save lives.
They do.
And Han Solo.
Individual clones of the 332nd can be seen patrolling the catwalks when Maul, still holding up one of the previously choked clones, opens up the door and then hurls the body into one of the clones, knocking him off the catwalk with a kind of a Wilhelmish. Dashing forward towards one of the consoles, another clone shoots at Maul while simultaneously reporting that target number 2 is in the hyperdrive room. And then the context of like, oh, that's where we are. I never once considered that capital ship hyperdrives were that big.
Well, to move the whole ship.
You know, I think it like the hyperdrive for
the Falcon is fairly small.
We presume it's small. You don't really see it. But we do in the Phantom Menace. In the Phantom Menace, when the hyperdrive breaks on the Naboo Royal ship, they pull the whole thing out. And it's big, but it's like as big as a bookcase, right?
You do get to see the Falcon's hyperdrive in the Lego Star Wars game. So one of the like bases. I don't know how canon those things are, but you get to explore the Falcon in detail. And there are a whole bunch of different rooms you get to go into.
That's cool. So, is that the new one?
It's kind of possible.
Is the new one even out?
The new one, they keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it.
Enough.
I'm super excited, though. I friggin' love those games.
So with some creative use of the Force, Maul forces the clone to aim at his own men before firing a burst to kill 3 more clones. Then he switches to this neat kind of hand-to-hand sequence where he uses a flying knee strike to knock the helmet right off the head of one of the troopers. He then catches the helmet and uses it to absorb a pair of blaster bolts before force-pushing the helmet into his assailant, knocking him off the catwalk. Ah! Hank, you'd talked previously about the Force being sort of intrinsically linked, you know, if we can, at the risk of ostracizing ourselves again, talk about sort of the M count and how having half a body potentially, means that there's some diminishment there.
I was thinking about that very thing in terms of also the High Republic having sort of canonized why Palpatine was able to hide from the Jedi in terms of having this much pain and turmoil in the galaxy. And that's one of the things that sort of creates galactic feedback with the Force, between the Force and the Jedi, if you will.
Yeah.
How friggin' powerful is Ahsoka in this episode? You know, like leaping through a burning atmosphere while just running along the hull of a Star Destroyer. And
there is that, yeah. So,
and is it more subtle than we know? Is it literally her letting go of her attachment to the Jedi that frees her up? You know, is the Force self-aware? Is it aware? I'm not sure if I'm putting it in good enough words, but do you know what I mean? Like, is the Force aware that she's on a different path and therefore it's being more receptive to her abilities? Whereas these, I don't know what I'm saying.
If we go with the very stringent Lucas, not Lucasfilm, but George Lucas himself, if we go with the midichlorians as microscopic organisms, they are alive. Are they? Right. They never talk about whether they're sentient or intelligent, but I mean, an amoeba is still a living creature.
100%.
Spores, molds, and funguses, they're all alive. So maybe on some level, maybe there is an awareness. And maybe, not to cross over our franchises here, but, that whole collective intelligence concept that we see in one of the other Star shows is not necessarily out of the question. At least I don't think it is anyway.
If you have these sort of Marvel-style gods in control of vast amounts of these powers, certainly there might be some sort of sentience to the Force itself.
Yeah, maybe.
And therefore, knowing that she's needed is granting her full access to her abilities. And it kind of puts an even deeper, maybe more esoteric thing on it. Maybe we're reading way too much into it.
Well, when you say gods, that's a good point, because we're gonna touch on that briefly towards the end of this episode. But certainly we can talk about that now when future shows in Rebels, where the world between worlds and Mortis and the three beings.
Right.
I mean,
let's not forget at this point in the story.
Yep.
That she's already been resurrected.
That's right. So when we talk about those sort of in-between space and time beings who are presumably manifestations of the Force itself, yeah, maybe there is an intelligence there.
Yeah. I think I also just answered my own question. She is the sister, and that's why she's so powerful.
The daughter.
Sorry, the daughter. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
there is
She is the daughter.
there is an argument to be made for her being the daughter or an aspect of the daughter because of that resurrection. And that's what we're going to come to towards the end of the episode.
Right.
So, but going back to this whole, like, your force potential is maybe linked to your midichlorian count, and Maul is half a man.
Half a man, yeah.
It's pretty impressive how his display of force ability in this scene when he begins to, he rends an entire computer console right off the deck and pitches it like it's nothing.
Just because it was in the way. He wanted to stand in the center of that platform.
Yeah.
I noted that. I was like, that's just the thing in the way. It's like throwing a desk aside because you like to stand and pontificate in the middle of the room. That's
Exactly.
literally why he does that.
And then just casually, not giving much thought to, am I still under attack? Starts heaving on the 2 hyperdrive generators. And I'm like, okay, he's going to break them, right? And we've seen displays, isolated uses of the Force, like from Maul when he pulled the deck plating off and used it as a weapon, or Jedi overriding a door to open a door. But
this goes beyond even when Dooku was throwing pillars.
This is what I mean. Yeah,
Kenobi and Skywalker.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
he's rended these 2 pieces of machinery off their foundation,
and then proceeds to use them to smash the next wave of clones.
Exactly.
Yeah, it leans heavily into the previous versions of the Force in the original Clone Wars animated.
Oh yeah, for sure it does.
Where
If you've never watched the Genndy Tartakovsky stuff, folks, highly recommend you go back and you watch it. It's really, really good. You could almost watch it as a precursor to this show.
Certainly don't feel it takes anything away, but the Jedi are friggin' powerful in it.
Big time.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, up on the bridge, the command crew working frantically, attempting to bring the ship out of hyperspace. But the destruction of the generators has made that impossible. As the ship begins to uncontrollably fall out of hyperspace, Maul guides the falling generators, landing them conveniently on top of a squad of 332nd clones that were just trying to kill him. From there, we get an exterior shot of the ship dropping out of hyperspace, and it looks bad. The entire aft section of the ship looks to be heavily damaged, and as the ship passes the camera, explosions erupt from the engines as the ship drifts over an unnamed planet towards a moon. As Ahsoka, Rex, and the droids charge toward the hangar deck, the klaxon can be heard going off, prompting Rex to remark, "I don't like the sound of that." The companions burst into a control room overlooking the main hangar, and Rex stuns the naval troopers that are there. They quickly deduce that the hangar doors are sealed, and Rex remarks,
I got everything locked down. If they weren't trying to kill us, I'd be proud.
strange moment for him to, to reflect
They're doing
on.
their job.
They really are. Ahsoka sets about issuing instructions to the droids. She orders R7 to start opening the doors on Bay 12. She then tells Cheap to prep the shuttle and instructs Gigi. As the klaxons continue to ring, a squad of clones and a couple of astromech droids make their way past a junction, presumably on their way to the hangar, just as Maul enters the same junction. Maul, taking cover against a wall, listens as his comm goes off, and we learn that hangar control has failed to report in because Ahsoka and Rex just subdued them. And the clone lieutenant giving the orders reasserts that he believes they'll try and escape through the main hangar, and then orders additional clones to stand by there and wait for his signal. Armed with that new information, Maul then darts off on his own. And it's this neat little back and forth. We saw a little bit of that, the previous episode, go be a distraction, be a diversion.
That's right.
And I think, Andy, you had mentioned how it was reminiscent of Obi-Wan bouncing around the Death Star.
Yes.
No, seriously, it is. Yeah, the way he sort of does the double takes and the.
I felt like this was sort of this felt even more like that, but at the same time, it felt like it felt kind of like chess because you got to see each side make their move independently of each other, And you kind of got this sense of like where they were in relation to each other, where you didn't really get that before.
One thing on the descriptive audio at this point, though, it's Jesse making those calls.
So again, for whatever reason here in the shop, because of my Roku being an older device, I cannot get the descriptive audio to go off. Right. So I did piece it together that it was Jesse, but it kind of came later when I'm like, oh, right. It is him.
Right. He's the highest ranking clone now that Rex.
He is, yeah.
Jump ship, if you will.
Presumably, the whole clone command structure is baffling to me because, I mean, do they place emphasis on training or rank? I mean, because surely to God, there are higher ranked naval troopers or higher ranked clones even, but Jesse's an ARC trooper, so does that mean he just has more... I mean, he's a more specialized clone, that's for sure.
Like possibly, or like certain types of training give you another tier of like, well, not official rank or tiers of hierarchy. It's more of an official respect thing. Like if you would like the Green Berets.
He's the highest trained guy here, even though he's a lower rank, and we're going to defer to his...
So if we're going to move into a combat situation, we should defer to his combat expertise, whereas I'm a clerk.
Right, exactly.
So I might be a colonel, but I polish your guns, boys. Maybe we should let So that's entirely possible. I think it's also with Fibes and Echo and those characters gone. He's the perfect person from Rex's past to put in this situation.
I just thought about him in context of this arc, and earlier on, Jesse was the one taken prisoner and interrogated by Maul forcibly.
Yes.
And and he was so like, he was like, I'm sorry, I told them everything, and Ahsoka kind of forgives him for that. And now here we are, and it's the complete opposite, and he's the one now that's charged with, bringing them in, killing them.
He hesitates a couple of times, but then he makes the opposite decision of Rex. Well, certainly
he does. I mean, he fully reverts to program, even in that moment when it finally happens, and you see it where like Rex is questioning him. I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but Rex questions his sense of right and wrong, and he kind of buys into it for like half a second, and then the shoulders drop, the head kind of cocks off to the side, and it's like, it reminds me of some of the lines from when I was in the military. If you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. Mm-hmm. And at that point, when Jesse kind of drops his shoulders and turns his head, like, he's had enough bullshit. Do you know what I mean? Because that's where he kind of reasserts himself. No, I am accusing you. And then the whole thing takes a turn.
But throwing back to that point where he was kidnapped by Maul,
yeah,
they do point out he's one of the older clones.
Older clones, yeah.
So maybe age of a clone has something to do with the ranking?
Well, age too, and sure, certainly if you've lived
longer, then you would have more experience.
More combat experience, yeah.
And just like you're going to get a reputation. You've been in more battles, you've been around longer. Ostensibly, out of the millions and millions of clones that were made and the hundreds of thousands or even low millions that die, people that survived for that long are going to have some sort of notoriety or celebrity.
I would think so, yeah.
Respect, bare minimum respect.
Certainly amongst their own ranks. I mean, stories travel across the military, so I can only imagine that the Republic military is no different. Meanwhile, back in Hangar Control, Rex and Ahsoka learn from Gigi that the hyperdrive is not only offline, but has been utterly destroyed.
Destroyed? It's completely gone?
And the ship is now caught in the gravitational field of the nearby moon. Ahsoka orders R7 to open the main hangar doors. The hangar doors to a Victory-class Star Destroyer run the full length of the ship's forward hull. And as they crack open, we see the grim visage of the moon's surface coming into view. It's clear that the ship is doomed, and Ahsoka stoically says, "We need to get out of here." We get a quick shot of the Venator, and we can see that it's starting to break apart. What appears to be the thrust nozzles of the main engines have come off. Mm-hmm. Among the chaos on board the doomed ship, clones continue to race towards the hangar. while Maul casually strides along just behind them, undetected. Back in hangar control, R7 has managed to get the berth that contains the shuttle to get the bay unlocked, and as the doors retract, a Republic attack shuttle comes into view. Ahsoka, with just a hint of excitement in her voice, says, "There it is." But that excitement is short-lived as several other bay doors open and a large force of clones spill out into the main hangar. Dejected, Rex intones, "They were waiting for us." As the clones fall into rank and file, we see ARC Trooper CT-5597, Jesse, stroll out in front of the formation, ordering his men to hold position, and that if they try to leave, they'll have to go through us. Rex, ever the fighter, questions, "Are we going to fight our way to the shuttle?" And dejectedly, Ahsoka remarks that there are too many, and that she doesn't want to hurt them. Her sorrow in the moment is palpable, but not as palpable as the pain and anger that Rex feels as he exhorts how, despite the impending crash of the ship, his clone brothers don't care.
I hate to tell you this, but they don't care.
They're willing to die in the crash and take both him and Ahsoka with them. It's a powerful and sobering moment as Rex's own humanity is contrasted up against the cold, inhuman, droid-like persistence of the clones who are now acting out Order 66.
I think this is the moment Rex realizes that what the mission, and the clones have always had the same mission. In fact, they, when they die, it's like they're programmed to say the same thing, like the mission is over.
Yeah.
He realizes that the mission is to get him and Ahsoka. The mission is to destroy the Jedi and any clone still loyal to the Jedi, and that his mission is over. So there's a moment of that there where his only purpose now is to survive. Maybe he's got some fatherly protecting of Ahsoka to do, as she seems to be taking the lead in the protection sort of situation here. But it's a huge moment for him where I think there's enough time for him to breathe and really realize that his mission is over, but he has to live through that.
Yeah. I feel like there's a bunch of other things going on there for him as well. Like, you know, there's a potential where, like, he sees this is the end. And, you know, looking down there and seeing those clones in formation, seeing Jesse, his friends, knowing that, you know, they're between him and living. And the idea of having to fight your friends, having to get through, having to kill your own, has to play very heavily on what he's feeling. Ahsoka, seeing her friend hurting, takes a moment to pull off Rex's helmet, and we see the pain as the tears streak down his face.
Oh, man.
She attempts to comfort him, reminding him that he and all of the other men on board the ship are good soldiers, but she isn't the one who's going to kill them.
But I am not the one who is going to kill them.
Rex contemplates their option, questioning, "Are we just going to surrender then?" And when Ahsoka answers,
No.
Rex retorts, "Well, I don't see any other option." Turning her attention back to the hangar deck, Ahsoka takes in the formation of troops for a second before saying, "I think I have an idea," and follows that up with,
Don't worry. It's a good one. I think.
She then turns towards the three astromech droids and says, "Can I count on you three?" The three droids bleep and blurp their approval, and as the ragtag band of heroes depart from hangar control, Ahsoka says, "Good, I'll explain on the way."
That's very Anakin. I think it's a good one. Is a crazy Anakin line.
Which part?
Like, just the way she delivers it. Don't
Yeah.
worry. It's a good one.
It's a good one.
You know?
Yeah.
That's a very Anakin, way to, like,
There was
I'm
that.
just gonna jump in. I'm making this up as I go along. Very Indiana Jones.
Yeah, and the optimism in her voice at that point too,
Yes.
like, was like, "Oh, that's good." Like, there's still some, as we said earlier, we all universally accept that, Star Wars is sort of themed around hope at its core, and
Right.
even then, this moment, there it is.
A thought
And
there.
she's
though.
not a good soldier if who she was trained by doesn't shine through. And in these situations, Anakin is cocky and arrogant and sharp as a tack. And
Yeah.
that shows through right here.
It does. What are you going to say, Andy?
A thought on the whole, I'm not going to be the one to hurt them.
Yeah.
Inadvertently, she technically is. because she's the one who unleashed Darth Maul, who then ripped out the hyperdrive.
So that's definitely an interesting counterpoint, and you can't really, you can't ignore that.
Yeah.
Well, I'd said last episode as well, if we're going to blame her for anything in terms of letting Maul go, is that while it's a distraction to provide for her personal survival and Rex's personal survival, she unleashes this guy, a crime lord with the abilities of a Sith Lord, on the galaxy.
Yep.
So maybe a good chunk of the Ahsoka Tano show should be about how she's trying to track down Maul as well, to sort of,
put that one
make
right.
up for that, possibly.
So I don't want to get away from what we're talking about too far, but as far as that show is concerned, isn't Ahsoka supposed to cross over with the Mandalorian?
I believe so.
I had heard that. I'd also heard that we were going to, and again, rumors are going crazy right now, but I'd also heard rumors that we were going to see Ahsoka Tano in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show too, and not possibly be in the same timeline, like not timeline, but the same era. It would be a much younger Ahsoka in the Obi-Wan show.
I think for Ahsoka to spend any amount of time trailing Maul, we're talking about setting the show much earlier than maybe we were led to believe.
You're right. You're absolutely
or
right.
A series of flashbacks, I guess.
Yeah, I do.
Which I'm okay with, by the way.
Yeah, no, me too. I'd like to see her whole life story minute by minute. But in terms of maybe if her having having a negative impact on the galaxy, it's probably the aftermath of having let starting from the death of all the clones, right up to having him being the one sort of pulling the strings in Solo.
Well, I mean, isn't Ahsoka the one that puts them on to going to pick up Rex and Gregor and Wolf?
Yes.
So I mean, clearly she's maintained connections with them. There is something I'd like to see explored. I'd love to see the aftermath. And we talked about it extensively through the Clone Wars. I wanted Rex to have a face-to-face with Boba Fett, and maybe that'll still happen. But definitely I would like to see sort of the last vestiges of like the last surviving clones and how did they live out their final days and what was the fallout for them. Because, I mean, we
might get a little bit of that in the Bad Batch. We might just dip into those areas. They might be saving that stuff for us. That would be a thing that would justify that storyline.
I think that
at some point they cover up Rex getting away, or if they, in any fashion, aid the sort of refugees of Order 66. I think that could be incredible.
More than anything else, that is the thing that keeps me, keeps me calm and sort of interested in what the Bad Batch might be, because it's no secret. I feel like that they're a knockoff of the clone commandos, of which Gregor is one, by the way.
No, it's true. And I do agree with that sentiment. Hopefully they're weaving a large web. I mean, Fennec Shand is definitely in the Bad Batch.
We saw the animation model for her. She looks great.
I caught that in the trailer way back when. I was thinking, like, was that Fennec Shand? I think it was back when we were doing the Mandalorian series. So. Yeah, so I'm gonna with Filoni and Favreau doing a lot of the strings. I'm gonna let them. I'm there. I'm in.
I'm along for the ride, no matter what. Like I said before, and I'll say it again. You could paint Star Wars on a rock, and I would stare at it if you told me it was a new Star Wars rock.
Yeah,
you know
what I mean?
To levitate it on your head.
Yeah.
You're listening to Fandom Power.
So on the hangar deck, Jesse stands before the formation of clones when Ahsoka, with hands over her head, is led in by Rex. Her plan, as it turns out, is a ruse to convince Jesse that Rex is actually bringing her in. Rex and Jesse go back and forth about the interpretation of Order 66 and how it pertains to the Jedi, with Rex arguing that Ahsoka is no longer a Jedi and hasn't been for some time. But Jesse isn't buying it. He goes so far as to parrot Rex's own orders back to him about being under special order from Darth Sidious himself. Rex makes one last appeal to Jesse's sense of right and wrong, saying that if they don't get it right, it will be them committing treason and not Ahsoka.
If we don't get this right, we will be the ones committing treason, not her.
But Jesse is unshakable and formally accuses Rex of treason. The whole dialogue has given R7, Gigi, and Sheep enough time to maneuver across the hangar undetected, and before Jesse can order his clones to fire on Rex and Ahsoka, the droids spring their own trap consisting of dropping the service elevators that most of the clone forces just happen to be standing on. Dropping the elevators to the maintenance level below, the ruse works to good effect as roughly half of the clones are effectively removed from the ensuing battle. Rex, with his pistols still set to stun, begins returning fire while Ahsoka defensively redirects all the incoming fire away from everyone. So, true to her word, she doesn't want to kill them. She's not redirecting them back at, like they would typically in a...
She's a shield right there.
Yeah, exactly. She's just tossing them, willy-nilly kind of anywhere, but away from anybody where they could hurt them.
That's right.
At this point, Maul enters the hangar, and seeing the fracas, he seizes a chance to steal the shuttle out from under them, while simultaneously avoiding the remaining clones. Gigi, seeing this unfolding, frantically begins bleeping a warning to Ahsoka, and both she and Rex see it and give chase. Maul screams at Ahsoka, "You wanted this chaos!"
You wanted this chaos!
Before force pushing her towards one of the open elevator shafts. But using her lightsabers like an ice climber would their ice axes, Ahsoka is able to dig into the deck, slowing her fall enough to give Gigi time to deploy a cable, which she is able to grasp before falling several decks below.
She nearly cuts Maul's head off here. He has to physically step back, not use the Force. He has to physically step back. And even after he force pushes her with such force that her lightsabers don't even grab, they cut back to him, and he's clutching his pearls. The look on his face when that lightsaber goes millimeters by his throat is he nearly dies there. That was awesome. You get to see fear in his eyes right there.
Yeah. I think really it's his only spoken line in the episode.
Absolutely.
You wanted the chaos, yeah. So it's enough of a break to give Maul the opportunity to get to the shuttle unscathed, although not, unaffected, as we just pointed out.
Oh, yeah.
Meanwhile, Jesse and the other clones who have fallen to the maintenance level begin to come around and get back to their feet, and they start shooting up at the heroes. All the while, Gigi is struggling to reel in the cable that Ahsoka is dangling from. Jesse orders his men to get the elevator back up to the hangar level, and Ahsoka climbs the rest of the way out. As she makes her way out of the shaft, we see Maul maneuvering the shuttle out of its berth, moving towards the open hangar doors. Ahsoka, desperate to not let him leave with the ship, attempts to hold it with the Force. Maul pours on the throttle, and the thrust is enough to drag Ahsoka down the deck. Rex tries to grab a hold of her, adding his weight to the tug-of-war, but a reorganized contingent of Jesse's troops forces Rex to let go so that he can bring both of his pistols to bear. And loyal right to the end, R7 attempts to get in front of Ahsoka, but is caught in the dome by random blaster fire and falls lifeless to the deck. So, unsung, I really got the impression that R7, we talked a bit about the loyalty that droids tend to develop, especially astromech droids, right? And here we are, right to the end, Rex sees what's going on, tries to grab her because she's getting dragged down the deck. He's like, well, I'll just hold on to her. He can't do it because he's got to use both guns to fire back. And so what does R7 do? I'll just put my body in front of her so that maybe we'll stop her. And just trying to make that, get around in front of her, catches one in the head.
And this is the moment I was talking to you about before we went on air. This is the one that got me big time.
Yeah.
Because she, you want to see if your friend's okay, but that's not the job. and just very painful to watch that. In terms of some things that we've talked about in the past.
Yeah. They're each so focused on what they're doing, and it's like, in that moment, I kind of wondered, like, where the awareness of each other was, like, because to me it felt like, again, she's so focused on trying to prevent the shuttle from leaving because that's their way out. That's right. He's like, I can't hold on to you and cover you at the same time, so I have to choose. And so he goes right back into soldier mode and does his job, which at this point touches on that stuff that we talked about before, where now the job is different, and now having to, yes, he's using his pistols on stun, but having to fight your own people. Oh
man. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh.
Having been struck in the shoulder, Rex yells to Ahsoka that he can't hold them off. There's too many of them. Ahsoka resolves to help her friend, and in that moment releases her grip on the shuttle and turns her attention back to the firefight behind her. But for a second,
surprised.
Yeah.
He's actually surprised by it.
And I think she is too, because she's holding, and like, she, for a second, she hesitates and then lets go. Like, she's got to stop and make that choice to let go and focus on what's important. And I think in that moment, we really see what is important to her, that, the whole bond. We kind of talked about this before, where we knew that they were close in the sense that they had fought many battles together. But, we'd kind of remarked about how when she said, like, and I couldn't ask for a better friend, you're like, oh, they're that close?
Yes.
We didn't really get that before. I think that really shines through in this moment where, she's really made the decision that, live or die, I'm going to do it with my friend.
And ostensibly she's giving up the choice to live, to just give her friend 5 more minutes, because they're both going to die anyway.
That resolution of, like, we're not getting out of here, we're going to go down together.
But we're going to go down together. And we're going to, on our terms.
At this point, Maul makes good his escape, and we can see what's left of the Venator still coming apart as it falls into the atmosphere of the unnamed moon. And as the shuttle passes the camera, we switch to an interior shot of the cockpit and of Maul as he jumps the ship into hyperspace. And that is the last we see of him for a few years.
That's right.
Meanwhile, as the battle on the hangar deck continues, clones have now circled Rex and Ahsoka on 3 sides. With nowhere to go, Ahsoka releases her lightsabers and uses the Force to make them cut a circular pattern in the deck below them.
It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
It's super cool, yeah. There's a moment in Legends. Oh, it might be Dark Force Rising. It's one of the first 3 Zahn books where Luke enters it's like I don't want to call it a throne room, but it enters a round room. And in the room, it's dark, so you can't see. And there's a bunch of, like, floor-length tapestries hanging in the room, and behind each tapestry is a Nogri assassin.
Okay.
And he uses the Force to sense their presence and basically throws his lightsaber in a circular motion around the room, killing all of them in this, like... and drops them all in.
I don't know if we actually ever had the actual conversation, but I remember it being like this bone of contention when I was a child. Even then, when Vader in Return of the Jedi throws his saber
at Luke,
and it stays on. There was this whole idea that you had to have your thumb on the whole time, and that how somehow he was using the Force to keep the thing lit.
It on.
Because every time, other time you see a Jedi sort of
drop it,
lose their weapon, it goes out,
go off
automatically. Yeah. Right, like Luke gets his hand cut off, the blade is off. Like
yep.
Right, so there's that. In terms of the ability to be able to keep it on and then redirect it around the room, or
is it like a drill where you've got the trigger lock?
Maybe it's biometric.
Maybe
right? I mean, that's a thing in our world now, biometric weapons. So,
it
really lends credence to my role-playing character of a Jedi without an arm that still wields.
Still can wield a lightsaber, yeah.
with that hand, although it's just a sort of a force projected hand. It looked like the lightsaber is doing all the things it normally would do, but floating, a foot off his elbow kind of action.
Certainly the biometric thing is an interesting concept, but Empire, we see Han Solo use it as a tool, but he still uses it to gut the Tauntaun.
Yes.
Well, they do touch on that in the Disney Infinity game. One of Vader's moves is literally just, heaving the lightsaber and cutting down his enemies.
It's really prevalent in Star Wars video games. Force Unleashed is you can toss a lightsaber. Knights of the Old Republic, there's a lightsaber throwing maneuver. So I mean, I think there's a lot of width and breadth for interpretation, and I don't think that any one of them is right, and I don't think that any one of them is wrong. I think there's a healthy mix of all of the things that we think it may be.
I do agree with Lauren on certain points where if you have the ability to wield the Force, it certainly seems, at least from what we've seen, and we've seen plenty of power, but that the Jedi and Sith are very limited in terms of imagination, because the things we can see them do, and Lauren keeps coming back to, why can't they fly? If you can levitate a Star Destroyer and pull it down from orbit, why can't you fly? And Leia does fly through space.
That's right.
The Last Jedi. So.
That's true.
Or does she?
And in terms of like sort of magic ability, if you will, and you want to bring it into the Marvel universe a bit, or the Harry Potter world, if you will, imagination is heavily, influences what you can do with your abilities.
Of course it does.
And so even in role-playing terms, that like a sort of quicker on their feet player character can influence their game character to do different and alternate things with their abilities that are exciting. And so I think maybe the austereness of the Jedi Order limits them, and maybe the serious dark nature of the Sith limits them. And somewhere in the middle is this amazing Force user that can do the most amazing things because they're not tied to the dogma of either thing.
True enough. If we want to go back for a second, though, and I just want to touch on the because you make a good point about Leia flying through space, and I know like it tends to get written off as like the Mary Poppins moment, and it's funny, haha. But I mean, for me, first time around, this kind of touches back into that whole idea of the Force actually having a sentience and consciousness, because in my mind, Leia didn't do that. The living Force did that. I mean, Qui-Gon Jinn himself says, be mindful of the living Force. So on some level, there has to be some, purposeful moments where the Force does what it does without you knowing it.
I sort of disagree a little semantically. I understand what the sentiment of what you're saying, but she opens her eyes and reaches out with her hand in that scene. That's the only thing
agree.
That makes me feel that's semantically different.
That absolutely happens, but that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that she did it. I mean that she's exposed to the vacuum of space, where by rights she should be boiling.
Yep.
And as soon as she hits the deck of the ship, she drops unconscious immediately.
That's right. So it's almost like she's being possessed by the Force.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I say, like, to me, it was an easy rationalization, that is the living Force embodied.
And we've certainly seen that in Legends novels, where the can't recall the name of the novel, but the one where Luke dies on Dathomir, and the Force brings him back to life.
Yeah.
Where he's dead, and he can feel the insects and the planet breathing and the entire universe, and the Force literally just, because he does a quantum leap in his ability in Legends after that.
He Pandora's it.
Right. And so, so there's while not canon, there's a perfectly super large example of the Force being able to.
By Pandora, I meant the planet Pandora, not the box.
Yeah.
No, it definitely makes for a great discussion, and I just, again, in my own nerd moment, we could talk about this stuff for hours without even having a structure.
No, it's true.
I do have a thought on it.
Yeah, go for it.
The Force user cannot fly because they're a conduit. So they are pulling the Force in and redirecting it out. So if they were to pull it in and redirect it at themselves, you'd just get like a feedback loop and crack out.
Crush yourself?
Get a giant, sort of like a giant leap.
Maybe.
They can.
But they definitely
clearly,
can do that.
right?
They definitely do that all the time.
Well, I'm going to climb to the top of the Bell Alliance building. I'll let you know as it.
Yeah,
how it
let me
works.
know how it goes.
Okay.
Oh, where are we? Oh, yeah. So she cuts the. Ahsoka uses the Force, does this crazy buzzsaw thing where she cuts the deck out from below them. And yeah, then it quite literally whoop drops out, and down they go. We get a quick glance at the Star Destroyer at this point. It's now hitting the upper atmosphere, and we can see that the hull has begun to superheat. Having just fallen a couple of decks down to the maintenance level, Ahsoka and Rex are kind of shaking off the cobwebs and getting back to their feet when they realize that this is a very real from the frying pan into the fire moment, as Jesse and all the clones who fell in the droid's trap
They're right there.
now have their weapons trained on them. Behind the clones, we can see Republic Y-Wing fighters in the distance. Rex, recognizing the severity of the situation, sighs in exasperation, and Jesse barks a sharp, "Blast 'em!"
Blast them!
And as blaster fire erupts, it's quickly interrupted because back up on the hangar deck, Cheap and Gigi have gone and made their way back over to the elevator controls. And Cheap has triggered the elevators to forcibly pop like a toaster.
Yep. Bunch of clone Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, really. And so the clones are launched into the air and then fall comically back to the deck. Sadly, this is the end for both Gigi and Cheap as a squad of clones discovers them and summarily blasts them to oblivion.
Blast those dirty droids!
Again, these poor droids,
Yeah.
these sort of unsung heroes who, it's amazing how quickly you can get attached to them, right? I mean, they were essentially, new characters just 2 episodes ago. And now they're, they play such an integral part of the last 2 episodes, and now done. And I don't remember, and maybe it's just me because it's been a long time since I've watched the show, but I don't remember Ahsoka having very much of a relationship with R7A7 before this arc. Do
I
you?
think there's a little bit in the initial Clone Wars movie, actually, when
Maybe.
they first introduced the character.
You know what? I'm gonna have to go back and take a look at that because I think you're right.
A little bit of it, but not, and it might pop up. There might be the odd thing where she's on her own mission. She's got a droid in the cockpit.
Yeah.
In the droid hatch of her Jedi fighter. But other than that, no, like even the episodes with the droids where there's like a team of droids.
Yeah.
They organically fit with the R2s, and he's not one of those droids.
No, because
They
it's
use,
it's a whole other contingent of droids.
That's right, with the KTQT.
Yeah. Yes. KTQT.
It's the young lady that died of cancer.
That's right.
That's a
Yeah.
beautiful story too.
Who was immortalized with a pink astromech action figure.
Absolutely.
So at this point, Ahsoka and Rex have managed to punch through the remaining clones as they are now struggling to find a working ship to escape with. Rex even goes so far to remark about how they're all here for maintenance. Go figure, maintenance on the maintenance level.
Mm-hmm.
Spotting a single operational Y-Wing, the two are overwhelmed by Jesse and his forces. The Y-Wing lying across a couple of open maintenance pits. Rex yells for Ahsoka to get me over there. And between her deflecting the hail of blaster fire and moving to gain position, Ahsoka manages to force fling Rex towards the open canopy of the fighter. It's
She
all
take a shot in the shoulder at some point here, doesn't
yeah.
Or is that before they drop the drop?
Yeah, it's all she can do to hold them off, even taking a bolt to the shoulder.
So that's a huge thing too, because the only other time we've actually seen a Jedi take a shot from a blaster bolt
yeah.
is Kylo Ren from Chewbacca.
That's right, yeah.
I think another time when we've
The
actually
gut
seen,
the gut shot
that's
that
right.
he just beats
So,
on to amp himself up.
Is that an innate toughness due to the Force? Is that a Force ability to just like withstand pain or to
Maybe.
like harden your skin? Like there's all kinds of I could get into that point for
Is
a
it
bit.
a glancing blow where, like
Yes.
people have taken bullet grazes and managed to sort of work through it?
In the next scene, Rex has a hole through his shoulder armor, clean through.
Yeah,
the
right through the pauldron.
But her shoulder is only just charred black.
Yeah,
She's not wearing armor, like right? Like, man.
As Rex scrambles into the Y-wing cockpit, another elevator drops to the maintenance level, bringing yet more clones with it. Ahsoka is looking pretty worn out now, and you can tell because their slashes, her lightsaber slashes, come with considerable effort. There's no finesse in this moment. She's literally just pure muscle memory, right? Trying to deflect the bolts. Meanwhile, back on the bridge, the command crew is struggling to bring the ship down in one piece. An order to fire retro rockets is refuted with, "We've lost all lateral control." And then, "We're going to break apart." But that last line is interrupted as the crewman's workstation explodes around him. The moon's gravity has now begun to take effect on the ship, and because of the severe pitch angle, anything not tied down begins to slide. Clones are knocked down by flying debris, and once again, using her lightsabers like a pair of ice axes, Ahsoka digs into the deck to slow her fall. Managing to regain her footing for a moment, she tries to leap to the Y-wing. Only the Y-wing falls from its mooring right out the bottom of the ship as the lowest part of the deck plating has actually been torn away from the ship, and she's now into free fall. Rex, in an act of deft piloting far beyond his station, starts the Y-wing mid-free fall and pulls it out of a flat spin before giving chase to the Venator.
Take that, oddball.
Yeah, really. Making his way through the debris streaming off the Star Destroyer, Rex spots Ahsoka in free fall, and he opens the gunner's dome while attempting to maneuver underneath her. And they miss. You know, she tries to grab onto the ring as he kind of whips underneath her, and for whatever reason she's not able to do it and gets kind of buffeted away from him. So there she puts herself into a free fall nosedive, and I didn't really understand what she was going for in this moment. I thought, is she just trying to get away from some of the smaller, because it was kind of like a debris cloud, I guess.
Yeah, I think she was like maybe even on one of the engines.
Yeah.
When she does that leap, the main body of the Star Destroyer.
Well, this is it. Like, why did she go from... Because once they miss that first time around, they've got to set it up to try it again. And I'm thinking, well, why doesn't she just, in free fall, just pull away from the debris?
I think because it bookends then with that original, "I'll meet you or I'll race you down."
Oh, that's funny that you say that now, because that totally makes sense to me now.
Then it was for, you know what, we're having a bit of playful. Now it's like, okay, we need to get this done.
Yeah, race you to the ground.
Yeah.
I don't have a jetpack. I don't need one. Yeah. Ahsoka, putting herself into a freefall nosedive, manages to get clear of most of the debris, actually managing to land on and run down a large broken-off section of the ship. Rex is then able to position the Y-wing ahead of her, and Ahsoka, in what I describe as a Hail Mary leap, throws herself off towards the fighter one more time. All the while still rocketing towards the ground. This time she's able to grab the gunner's hatch ring and pulls herself in.
There's a moment of panic on her face.
Well, there really is.
Almost feel like she used the Force to give herself that extra 6 inches there.
I wondered, like, is she pulling? Is she pulling? Is she not? It's ambiguous.
There's a look on her face there where she nearly
doesn't.
That moment of It's really well for a cartoon, bro. Really well done.
I had to keep in mind that they're literally in free fall at this point, right? So there's this element of like she's falling at the speed of gravity, whatever gravity on this planet is. Mm. He's under thrust from the engines of the Y-wing, so he's probably braking at some point, trying to match her speed. Okay. Like,
absolutely,
this is a super super complex, set of maneuvers. And Hank, you can appreciate this. This was my Robotech moment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is Rick Hunter trying to pull Min-May into the
100%.
Yeah, and I thought, oh my god, I can't not mention this.
The only thing that would have made it better is if Rex
if
Rex had got half out of the cockpit to actually grab her by hand.
Yeah, really. flew up against the
other thing
inside.
is Lauren noted in this, the physics in this scene. They animated the crap out of this.
No, they totally did. Yeah.
They're perfect. You can feel the G's that they're both pulling.
Yeah.
So cinematic, so big, and so intimate and personal at the same time.
I thought they were much closer to the ground than they were, because I was really caught up in the tension of like they might not actually pull this off, and I had visions of them thundering in. But then in the next moment, we kind of get a better idea of exactly where we're at when Rex pulls the Y-Wing out of its dive. And as the two pull away in the fighter, we can see that the Venator has uncontrollably rolled onto its side. And as it descends through the cloud, the image I got was this like reminiscent of Jaws as the shark fin kind of goes below the water. Mm-hmm. In complete silence, Rex and Ahsoka acknowledge each other with just a glance before the scene cuts away to an overhead pan shot of the crashed Star Destroyer. It's come in belly down, and it looks to be mostly intact. At the front of the ship, we see the lone Y-Wing sitting on the ground facing the remains of the once mighty warship. Rex approaches the fighter on foot with a shovel in his hand. Securing the shovel, Rex turns to look back towards the Venator. At this point, we're treated to another piece of Kevin Kinner's compositional masterpiece in Burying the Dead, which plays like a funeral dirge as we see Ahsoka wrapped in her gray cloak, staring over the graves of the clones that she and Rex have undoubtedly just buried. 3 ranks of graves, each one marked with a clone helmet. The shot is punctuated with a close-up of Jesse's helmet bearing the Republic sigil, the last symbol of hope, and now the first symbol of tyranny. Alone in her thoughts, Ahsoka removes one of her lightsabers from her belt. She glances at it and then drops it to the ground. It's almost like, in this moment, I had to think about it for a second, because I'm like, wait a minute, did she lose one?
I think she did.
She didn't.
No?
I rewound the episode and I made sure that I watched the whole free fall sequence, and she's got both of them strapped to her belt the whole time. So she's consciously made it. Why drop just one? Why not both of them?
It's a message.
I feel like, so I kind of thought, in the moment, it's like symbolically saying that she's buried a piece of herself, or that part of her died that day too. Do you know what I mean?
It's either a message for Anakin, or it's, I think now that I'm thinking about it, the thing that you said, I think it's maybe her trying to cover up herself being alive.
Do you think it's as simple as her way of like throwing anybody that might come after them off the trail, like I died in the crash?
Certainly it's heavier. I mean, it has bigger connotations. She hesitates. She's going through something in terms of her decision to let go that part of herself. But I think that knowing that that's going to be found might just throw them off the trail. It's probably it's very multifaceted.
It totally is. I was drawn back to the conversation back in the communication suite, where I did my duty as a citizen, and Yoda his, but not as a Jedi, and her not yet. Like there was some intention there with it. When you use the word "not yet," it implies like I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet. That's and right. I wonder if this was her way of like 100% completely abandoning sort of, the Jedi way. Because really, in my mind, as I'm standing there, or as I'm sitting there watching her, and we see her wrapped, and I'm like, oh, it's Ahsoka the Grey, not a Jedi anymore, completely not a Jedi.
That's right.
Which contrasts with our opinion of what we said about her in The Mandalorian, where we all kind of agreed that, nope, she's come back to the Jedi ways. So
this is a good 15 years before that, though.
For sure it is. For sure.
Yeah.
If it is a message to Anakin, Hank, what do you think the message is saying?
See, I had said that out loud, and now I'm thinking about it, because she has no way to know that Anakin is alive, or that Anakin's at the center of this. All she knows is what Maul told her, and she believes it firmly to be a lie.
Yep.
If it is a message for Anakin, it's maybe the message is that like there's hope, because I actually feel there's something to the next scene there's some symbology to the very next scene that is important for the Anakin Skywalker character, and maybe explaining that in a second will explain how I feel.
Okay.
It might have been a message.
Sure.
Before we jump to that, though, we should point out there is a droid, or at least pieces of a droid.
That's right. Yeah.
Under the wing.
Yeah. Before we recorded, we talked about this because I had mentioned earlier about my disappointment that they missed an opportunity to write Cheap as being Chopper before he was potentially, because Chopper clearly is a mishmash of droid parts when we see him in Rebels. And when we see Cheap show up, it's like, oh, it's the same voice. And it's got the same little ray dome on top of his regular dome. And I'm like, that's got to be Chopper. And then that whole like, well, we were thinking about making him Chopper, but then we didn't. And then now, Andy, like you say, and both of you, because I missed it. I was so inside my own emotions crying at the idea of burying these soldiers that I missed that there was droid parts stacked up underneath the Y-wing.
Mm-hmm.
We think it's possibly Cheap, possibly R7.
Yeah, I think we were split down the middle on that.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to look at the still while you guys were looking at it. I'd like to look at it again. But,
guys, if you've watched the episode recently and you have an opinion, drop us a line at our social media and tell us what you think. The scene kind of it's an interesting little transitory piece because it's not a wipe, but it's like a
crossfade.
It's a crossfade close up on her face to a Lambda class Imperial shuttle. So, we
the
fully
way it drops down over her nose, it makes the triangle over her mouth. It's like putting the helmet of Vader over her as we transition.
It's interesting, yeah.
In terms of that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And foreshadowing too, right?
Mm-hmm.
The shuttle lands. It's now a wintry, snow-covered field, and there's a contingent of both Imperial snowtroopers and standard stormtroopers.
Time has passed.
And while I know that it was just a reuse of the animation assets that they already had, I thought it was cool that we've now transitioned to the Rebel style animation. There is a stylistic change from the Clone Wars to Rebels.
That's right.
It's the crash site of the Venator, and this isn't just any shuttle. As we hear the unmistakable raspy breathing of Lord Vader as he strides across the screen. He approaches the nose of the Venator alone. An indeterminate period of time has passed, and the once clearly marked graves are no more. He pauses for a moment, and kneeling down, he picks up the lightsaber dropped there by Ahsoka. He hits the activation stud, and the blue blade springs to life. Closing down the blade and turning his gaze upwards, we can see the last vestiges of Anakin Skywalker behind the red lenses of Darth Vader's helmet, as he spots Morai, the Convar, circling overhead. Morai the Convar, also known as Ahsoka's owl, who, as we mentioned earlier, is often depicted as a servant of the daughter, or as the daughter of Mortis herself. So, this is where we were sort of inferring that, this is our first, I guess, real treatment to, like, contextual treatment of, like, how Morai is associated with Ahsoka.
Yeah, this is apart from those Mortis episodes,
right?
Because it's actually her familiar in Rebels.
Yeah.
And certainly we get the exact same flight overhead after the duel with Vader in Rebels. For me, there's some really deep thematic things going on here, and we're gonna have to jump back and forth between that duel in the future and this scene. In this moment, when Vader looks up at Morai, you can see Anakin through the red lens of the helmet. Now,
yep.
that's also a fan service throwback to the original way that Vader looked, the way they made him look in Rogue One, the way he looked in the original 77, just because they couldn't actually cover it up.
Yeah, the red lenses and not the all blacked out.
And they've thematically canonized that to represent the fact that you could just still see the edges of Anakin inside. There's a thematic thing here. So left and right sides in history, in literature, in religion, they have different connotations. Left always being dark and evil, and right always being good and just.
Right.
And find these themes run through like Greek mythology, they run through Norse mythology, they run through biblical stuff. They bleed into the fact that some of our grandparents were forced to use their right hand because left-handed children were of the devil. Okay, so when we see him look up through that lens, we're seeing his left eye.
That's true.
And we're seeing Vader look up at the sky to see Morai. And when that duel occurs, when she shatters his helmet with her lightsaber, we see his right eye.
It's the right eye.
We see the last parts of Anakin there.
Interesting.
And so this is a message. The lightsaber is a message to Anakin, and it's a message of hope. It might be like a doorbell. When he sees her for the first time, the apprentice lives. It's easy to feel like that duel happens very shortly after
this. Yeah.
Very short.
Yeah, it's easy to imagine, that's for sure.
Right? Like within months or maybe a year. Like the Empire is just forming. We've switched all the uniforms over. Maybe some of those stormtroopers are still clones.
They might be.
For a couple of years later, there's a patina to her saber. It's rusted, if you will.
Yeah, I definitely picked that up too. Like I'm like, oh, it's been there for a while. Some corrosion.
Right. And so I think it's really important. There's a really strong symbology there of darkness and light, and it plays out, and it's about hope. It's about letting go. It's about the immortal nature of Ahsoka the Grey and the struggle between good and light inside Anakin. We needed this ending because it ends. I said it before off air that Revenge of the Sith was it for us when we were kids.
That's right.
I mean, we were young adults, but it was it. There was no more Star Wars. That was the final note. Close the curtains. We didn't know about the future.
Yep.
It's all we had. And that this does the exact same thing, but it's so much more powerful.
I agree with you.
Such a better ending.
I agree.
There's the catharsis that we needed there. And I think a lot of this, like the Luke Skywalker episode of The Mandalorian, the Mandalorian itself,
yep.
Certain things that really struck heart notes in the sequel trilogies are all them beginning to understand that there's a catharsis in bringing up these old memories and maybe fine tuning them and correcting them and giving them the proper send off, if you will. And this is maybe the greatest ending of all time.
I agree with everything you said. I agree with all the symbology and all the thematic elements. Can I tell you what took me out of it? So this is just me. This is a nitpick, and it doesn't detract from the episode. Well, it does, but I don't mean this to pick it apart. But I find it difficult to accept that the graves were no more, but yet the lightsaber remained on the surface of the snow. Do you know what I mean? Like, at first I was like, did somebody come along? Because, like I say, it's an indeterminate period between the crash and the whatever this operation is. I don't presume it to be a recovery. Maybe it is a recovery of some sorts. But I would presume that anybody... To me, it was like, okay, the clone helmets are gone. So either the weather was so severe that they got blown away and all the stakes got knocked over, or somebody's come along and they've salvaged whatever they could, which included maybe the armor bits.
So if you watch it, there's a scene where Vader's walking up, and just for the split a second, it's not from behind, it's kind of off to the side. There are still helmets on spikes, but they disappear when he's standing there by himself.
Well, that's what I mean. And I mean, I went back and I looked.
They are there in the scenes. But they're not absolutely front and center when he picks up that lightsaber, of course.
Yeah, which is just there. You can see.
Maybe the snow had gotten so deep that was the point, and then it didn't make sense for, like you say, her lightsaber to be on
right
the
on top.
surface.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining maybe it's just, it has to be wind or erosion. They certainly buried the bodies pretty shallow. There was a lot of humps in the ground.
That is absolutely true. Yeah, they were almost like cairns and not graves, I guess.
But to the wind theory, there is a helmet a few feet away from the lightsaber.
Yes, and so
it could have been blown off.
Well,
Or
okay, so let's just close this off, because that is sort of that's the closing shot of the episode. Is Vader's sort of we've seen Morai. He turns to walk away, and as he walks past the camera, past his cloak, we see what's left of a 332nd clone helmet, and the camera pushes in on the helmet, and we see the reflection of Vader striding away in the visor of that helmet. But it's the only helmet that I can recall seeing in the shot.
Yeah, I'd have to take another look at that. That's very powerful too.
Yeah, him walking away.
I'm glad it wasn't Jesse's helmet being a 330. Like, it's the paint job. It's the Ahsoka's.
That's right. Her tattoo pattern, I guess.
Right, and it's close the curtains on that. It's perfect.
It's
perfect.
It's a super end cap. You know, I mean, you go back to the 2008. We got the feature film.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to 2008, and inside of the first 5 minutes, you know, you've got this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kid, you know, who shows up. Who are you? I'm Ahsoka Tano. I have been sent here. I'm an apprentice. And Obi-Wan's like, I've already got one. And she's like, I'm not yours. I'm his. You know, so it opens with her, and it closes with her on some level, you know.
Certainly.
So yeah, that was the only thing that took me out of the episode. But by that time, I was already so invested emotionally in all of the other stuff that it was like, nah, I don't care.
Yeah. But I know where you're coming from on a personal level. For you, the Graves was a heartstring puller.
Oh my God.
Suddenly they're not there. You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I want nothing more than to weep in front of Vader.
I'm like, what, grave robbers too? Shit.
Yeah.
Did we get the name of the moon? Did that come out anywhere?
There was some Orabesh that I didn't get to on the screen when they were crashing, and I don't know if that was like alert, hyperdrive's out, Jim's moon we're about to crash. You know, it could have been anything. I don't think it was uttered like that. We didn't get it.
I don't think so either. Just ambiguous.
Yeah.
Ambiguous moon of something. That was the other thing that that niggled at me, was we didn't get the name of the moon, and for the life of me, I thought for sure we'd get the name of the Star Destroyer. And maybe it's
that went down?
Yeah, maybe it's out there, but I didn't get it.
Did you not call it the Venator at one point?
Well, that's the class.
That's right.
That's the class. Let me see what Google says. Unidentified moon. Unidentified moon. That's nice to know. Yeah, so the moon is never named. Oh, okay. So the Venator class Star Destroyer Tribunal. That is. This is a Wikipedia entry. It is classifying it as a canon entry. If I click Tribunal.
Sources.
Yeah, really. Tribunal was a Venator-class Star Destroyer in service to the Galactic Republic during the end of the Clone Wars, after former Sith apprentice Maul was captured by former Jedi Padawan Ahsoka Tano during the Siege of Mandalore. He was transported aboard the Tribunal, with Tano and Clone Commander Rex intending to deliver him to the Jedi High Council on Coruscant. Interesting. Okay. I'm surprised that never... Yeah, I don't... It must have come out in one of the scripts or something. That's another thing, too. This week's research component on a lark, I actually typed in the episode into Google, and I typed the word script, and I actually got a script.
Oh.
Yeah. Like an actual script like that describes all of the shots and the transitions.
Certainly.
And, yeah, it was interesting. So I thought, you know what? There's an exercise if we ever wanted to go back.
That thought occurred to me late in the Mandalorian game, but
in the reviewing process,
like a blue butterfly. So
yeah,
but I had thought about that, and if they're out there, certainly it would be a great way to. I found myself when I was super into Lost, scouring the internet for the scripts to go through to see if there's no changes or weird things. So yeah.
And certainly scripts, do go through evolutions. I mean, entire movies can be, changed overnight, or even like in the dailies, right? Like, okay, here's the 6 pages we revised last night, and next thing you know, your actors are like, oh, got to learn these new lines, like crazy. I don't know if it happens so much in animation and ADR, but certainly in live action, it happens.
It would be nothing to change dialogue in animation because the mouth movements aren't. They certainly take liberties there. It'd be nothing to change dialogue.
Yeah. So there you have it. Before we get going, I want to go back and let's touch on the other piece of homework that we talked about, and that was, I guess, last week, all of the stuff that was happening with the clones. And, as Order 66 was unfolding, I was like, well, what about all the other named guys? What about...
Where do they go after it's done?
Done? So what about Wolf and Gregor, who turn up in Star Wars Rebels? I guess it's Ahsoka that kind of leads them to connect with them, but you had to wonder what happened to them. So there's a couple things here. One of them is just this vague... I'll talk about Wolf first because there was the least amount of information on him, and all I could come up with was there was a vague, it is likely that Clone Commander Wolf did carry out Order 66 at wherever he was in the galaxy, and it was after that he would have removed his inhibitor chip. Now, Gregor, on the other hand, is a little bit different because I had forgotten this, but Gregor actually shows up in a single appearance in Clone Wars. So it's Season 5, Episode 11. The short version is Gregor is a clone commando, as in like Republic Commando. But by the time he shows up in that episode, he's already got amnesia because something happened. He was injured or something in a battle, and he had amnesia, and he was working as a dishwasher. So the life that had been built around the amnesia was that he was indebted to some other guy, essentially. Yeah, but by the end of the episode, like, he sees a recording from Rex, and he's made aware of who he is, that he's a commando. He makes a promise to come home, but by the end of the episode, now it's part of the 4-episode arc with R2-D2 and the droids, where the droids kind of do their special mission thing with the little, and I can't think of his name, the little Republic general, who basically is like, it's like a little frog guy, really. But at the end of the episode, you're kind of left with the impression that Gregor may have died in the final moments of that episode, because there's a big firefight and there's I guess some explosions and stuff. Which of course he didn't die, but there is no mention of Gregor between that single episode and the time that he turns up in Rebels.
Yes.
So yeah, there you have it. It's not a clear and concise answer, but it's the best thing that I could come up with.
Well, there is one thing for Wolf.
What do you got?
Clone Wars writer Henry Gilroy.
Yeah.
He speculated at DragonCon 2018 that Wolf more than likely did follow through with the Order 66.
Sure.
And his chip was removed shortly after.
Right.
But the programming and the trauma still remained impactful on him.
I think that was key about Order 66 was the programming, motivated them in the moment, but it doesn't, negate the actual experience or the memory of it, right? Yeah. So, I mean...
Which kind of explains his aggression towards Kanan Jarrus when they get to that point.
Well, and therein lies that, as, Hank alluded to, maybe the Bad Batch will
clear
that up, because that whole aftermath about those guys who lived it, then now they've got to live with the repercussions of what they've done, and they know what they've done. So that could make for some very compelling television.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, that's it. That's Order 66. That is our 4-part review series with a hiatus in between. We did it. We made it through. We got through all 4 episodes. I think this was a good exercise in the review process. I was super happy to keep the Star Wars conversation going.
Fully. I think that maybe we might be able to, maybe we'll try an episode of the Bad Batch in terms of our palette and see if we want to pursue that as a review show. There's more stuff in the pipe. And quite frankly, I don't know about you guys, but my favorite property of lately, Mandalorian obviously notwithstanding, is Rebels, and I would love to sit down with you guys and talk about Rebels in some sort of maybe 4-part detail, one episode per season, perhaps even. I would definitely be down for something like that.
I think the research piece, because the whole thing started with The Mandalorian, and we dove into that really hard, but like all of those backgrounder pieces that we talked about, those, watch these 4 episodes of Rebels and watch these 7 episodes of Clone Wars. Exactly. Those are great pieces that we can go back and revisit to sort of keep it all tied together. And maybe that's what we can, for an ongoing Star Wars discussion, is we can look at pick out some of those key episodes about Maul and the Darksaber and
certain characters.
Yeah.
There's a ton to, and I'm thinking of devoting part of the other thing I'm working on to this, is that there's so much going on in comics right now, and at the heart of it is this gentleman Charles Soule, who's writing a lot of the High Republic novels, but he's writing all the canon Star Wars comics that are in the eras that we enjoy. So all the stuff about Darth Vader looking for Luke,
great,
all the stuff that happens, the hunt, the canon hunt for Han Solo, all happening right now in the comics. It's amazing stuff. If you guys can get your lips on them, oh man, there's some really, really strong things happening in the comics right now. And I'd be down for a heavy discussion on some of that stuff if you guys brush up. Yeah,
it would take me a while to get there. I'm not opposed to putting in the work, but it's going to take me a while to get caught up.
I get you.
That being said, let's talk a little bit about the future, where the show's going. And I don't just mean Fandalorian Order 66. I mean Fandom Power as a show. We're going to switch gears a little bit. Our next session, we're going into Marvel.
Yeah, Wes had a vision.
Wes's vision. No, so actually I was pitched. Guys are fans of the show. One of our guests, our frequent guest, Eric, down in Toronto, had called me up randomly walking down the street one day, and he was quite excited to say, "Why aren't we doing Fan Division?" And I said, that's a great idea. Of course, by that time, the show was like well into its run. And I think part of it was we had already committed to doing Order 66. So, I mean, there would have been some overlap.
Overlap for sure, yeah.
And I don't want to take away from one to give to another. Like if we're gonna go and do like a beat by beat style review, which I got to tell you, we're not doing that. Because there's one thing I've learned from taking up the hobby here in podcasting is that there is a lot of background to do. There's a lot of homework for me. So as the primary narrator of our tale, I do a lot of writing, and so I don't want one show to detract from another. So kind of want to make sure that what we're bringing you guys is entertaining. At its heart, it has to be entertaining. If it's not entertaining, then it's not worth doing. I want it to be fun.
But it has to be accurate, too.
Yes. Yeah, it absolutely has to be that. I don't want to say something that's not necessarily true, or, just pull it out of my butt and, put it out there like it is the gospel, because that's just not fair to anybody. But WandaVision has aired. It's now complete, all 9 episodes, and now the first episode, or perhaps the only episode of Assembled. So I like Eric's idea. Like, we're going to go back and we're going to take a look and we'll do a season in review, or a season highlight reel, I guess.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that coming very soon. Then I guess we've got some options, because there's all of the regular episodes, and I know, Andy, you pretty much write down everything. Every time I come up with an episode idea, you write it down.
Can't forget it.
I know you've got a list of them, so we have a breadth of things to pick and choose from. Really excited to develop the Masters of the Universe episode. I think that's going to be a fun conversation, because there's lots to talk about there. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is coming out here shortly. And within one day of that, the Snyder Cut.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they are March 18th, March 19th, respectively. So depending on when you're listening to this, you may or may not have seen them by now. But those are both properties I would like to visit on some level. And as always, we are open to you guys in terms of what you would like us to talk about.
Robotech. Excuse me. Sorry.
So I took the liberty of reaching out, not directly, but guys, if you follow our social media, I posted a couple weeks ago. There's a podcast out there. This is not a solicitation by any means, but the Reflex Point podcast. It's great. Yeah, two guys in the U.S., Major Medina and Paul Marquez. They do a episodic breakdown of every episode of Robotech, and I think they're up to episode number 17 now. They've had two guests already. They've had Rebecca Forstad, the voice of Lin Min-Mei, and they just had, oh my God, I can't think of the gentleman's name, Captain Henry J. Gloval. Just did a guest spot on their show, and very much they've got great chemistry. Their review style is similar to what we do with the Fandalorian and Order 66 in the sense that they break it down sort of, scene by scene and kind of go through it, and it's really fun. So if you like the long form feature length review style and you're a fan of the North American Robotech, I highly recommend you check it out. It's again, it's the Reflex Point podcast. And so if we ever get to the point where we do something on Robotech, I'd like to reach out to those guys and see if maybe we can do something with them. Maybe we can. Certainly.
I know, like you, for me, it's my other sort of big addiction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I said that in our social media posts. I mean, if anybody who's known me for any amount of time knows, how important Robotech is to me in terms of cultural significance and influence on what I like in terms of pop culture and animation. It's a top 2.
I couldn't tell you what I did in grade 10 and 11, but I know the wingspan of Veritech.
That's right. And I know that Claudia's pineapple salad is lethal.
Yes, sir. Acid notes in biology class.
That's a little joke for anybody who knows who's a fan. All right, guys, there's lots coming. So love to hear from you guys. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you want us to cover next. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, or you can tweet us, or you can email if you like. I don't recommend the snail mail. We've already talked about that once earlier today about how
but you're going to send us toys.
Strangely archaic the world is in wanting people to use snail mail for things, but to each their own, I guess. But that's it for me, guys. Anything else you want to close on?
I don't think so.
Fantastic. Another great time, fellas.
I almost don't want to switch the mic off. I'm actually feeling a longing like if I turn the mic on, we're not going to do this again. But I know that's not true because we are. Mm-hmm. Well, my friends, I'm glad that we got to do this. I hope you guys had a good time. It's been a hoot. I love it. This one was Order 66, so stay tuned for our next project. Fandom Power presents Fan Division. And until next time, Excelsior!
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Fandom Power. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll be talking about another one of your favorite fandoms. Fandom Power is a Sawcast production.